Hello everyone and welcome back to the second game of the second match of the Legends of Chess tournament between Nepomniachtchi and Magnus Carlsen. After Magnus won in round 1, and Nepo now has the chance with the white pieces to retaliate in game 2. So let's see if he will be able to do it to force things to go in his favor and maybe even win this match to force a third match. So let's see what happens. Nepo again, like in day 1, opens with e4, and Magnus, like in day 1, replies with c5. So will we see a repetition of the Najdorf from day 1 and Nepo's nicely prepared rook to g1 line? Well, let's see what happened. Knight f3, we have d6 and d4. So everything the same like in day 1, captures, and the knight to f6. We have knight c3, and again a6. Magnus does go for the knight of Sicilian, but we don't see rook to g1 here. Instead, Nepo goes for the Adams attack with h3. We have e5 by Magnus, the most popular reply to the Adams, and here not knight to e2, which is usually played, knight to b3 by Nepo. Also usually played, knight to e2 is just much more common. So bishop e7, and now the immediate g4. So going for the g5 move, h6 preventing this, and the bishop to e3. Nepo just continues development. We have knight b to d7, and now a4. And here there is a game where this position has been reached, where Magnus had the white pieces. He had it last year in the FIDE Grand Swiss against Surya-Shekhar Ganguly, where Ganguly played b6 and Magnus was able to win that game. However, here by playing the black pieces, Magnus goes knight to f8, and it's not a new move. It has been played before. The idea is shift the knight over to g6, as the f4 and h4 square has been weakened by the push of the g4 pawn. Here we have bishop to c4, and queen to d2 is a known move in this position. However, bishop to c4, the move Nepo plays, is a new move, so already as of move 11, we have a completely new game. Magnus continues with his development. Knight g6, prepares the castle kingside, and queen to e2 now. Nepo with the idea of maybe castling queenside. We have bishop to d7 by Magnus, and now f3, strengthening the pawns here, but kind of weakening the dark squares. We have rook to c8, putting pressure on the bishop. The queen does defend it for the moment, but now instead of castling queenside, Nepo goes for the immediate h4. He says, nah, my king is perfectly safe on e1. There's no reason to castle here. And Magnus says, okay, let's test this hypothesis by going knight to h7. And now there's a triple attack on the h4 pawn, and Nepo advances it to h5. So this is definitely something Nepo prepared, because Magnus does go for bishop to h4 check, and he says, what do you do now? So king to f1 is one possibility, but Nepo plays rook captures on h4, and this is where the fun really starts, because the problem is that you cannot capture with the queen. If you could capture with the queen, it'd be great, because it does come with check, but once you block it, if you go queen to h1 check, the king can just move, and then you again have to move the queen because it will be under attack by the rook, and then you lose another piece. So here you'd have to go back and then just h captures on g6, and what you've done is basically lost 2 pieces for the rook. So this is not possible to be captured by the queen. So Magnus goes for the only other move, knight captures on h4, which seemingly wins the exchange. But the question is, how is the knight going to return, as both the g6 and the f5 squares are covered by Nepo's pawns. So it in fact is a knight that will be captured sometime soon. So Nepo castles queenside now, and here, while you could try and do something, let's say, anything, Magnus says, okay, we cannot save this knight, so might as well grab this beautiful f3 pawn, which is the base of the pawn chain here, do some damage, as we're going to lose it anyway. So here, rook captures on d6 first. Point is, if queen captures, then rook captures on c4. But one thing Nepo could consider is bishop captures on f7, giving it up this way, and after queen captures, maybe continue playing it like this. And now, even though it's possible to play this with black, maybe in a rapid game, it would be somewhat harder to defend this position than the one Nepo chose. Here, Nepo went for rook captures on d6 instead, but now Magnus says, okay, no problem, queen e7, and now your rook is under attack. So here, rook b6 by Nepo, going after the pawn here, but now bishop captures on g4. And now, instead of doing some damage here, getting rid of this knight, maybe even capturing an f7, now you have this position where it's not all that clear what you are doing. So here, bishop goes to d5. Now puts pressure on b7. wants to go after that 7th rank, but now just castles kingside. And now Magnus says, you are welcome to go after the b7 pawn, because if you capture on b7, I don't really mind. My king is nicely castled. I'm going to go to h4, and everything is perfectly fine here. Next, my knight is coming back into the game, and so on and so on. The rooks are coming into the game. It's going to be a very, very comfortable position. Not right away, obviously, as you do have this f7 pawn to worry about, but nothing will come out of this captures on b7. So instead, we have queen to g2 by Nepo, unpinning and also threatening the pawn here. And now queen to h4 again. And now that the queen has come to h4, it's very uncertain how you will do this, because, okay, you couldn't move the bishop because of bishop captures on h6, or even rook captures on h6. The g pawn is pinned due to the queen being on g2. But now Nepo continues attacking like a madman, or should we say, well, let's not say it. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. Rook to g6. And now there's a double attack on the bishop. Of course, the rook cannot be captured because the bishop pins the df pawn. However, we have knight h to g5 by Magnus. Now there isn't a double attack here, and what do you do here? Well, Nepo improves the position with king to b1, but now bishop back to e6. Now offers a trade here, and Nepo decides that well, it's time to continue the attack. And instead of going bishop captures, Nepo goes rook captures. He gives up the other rook as well. We have f captures, and now bishop captures on b7, as this is defended, so you can't capture here. So bishop captures, attacks the rook, but now queen to e1 checked by Magnus. We have bishop to c1 blocking, and now rook captures on c3. So this is incredible stuff. We have b captures, and now knight captures on e4. So what do you do here? Well, your c3 pawn is under attack, so you have to take care of this knight. So bishop captures, and now queen captures on e4. And now bishop captures on h6, threatening checkmate on g7 and Magnus defense. And after all is said and done, we reach this endgame where it's queen, bishop, and knight against queen, rook, and knight with 4 pawns each. And will Nepo be able to hold this? Will he be able to win this, or will Magnus prevail? So let's see what happens. We have bishop back to c1. Nepo now might even consider pushing the h-pawn. We have queen to f5, and now attacking the pawn here, but now queen e2. So here, going after the a6 pawn, we have rook to c7, now putting pressure on the c3 pawn, and here Nepo defends it, king b2. And here Magnus goes for queen captures on h5 right away. However, there was the interesting idea that Karpov suggested in the live stream of e4, just giving up the a6 pawn and shifting the queen over here, because after this is captured and queen e5, the only way to defend on c3 is to go queen to a5, but here Karpov probably thought that you'd just trade, and after rook a7 you're going to win this pawn as well, knight c6 or whatever, rook captures, and you've traded down into a winning endgame. So it's remarkable how Karpov at such an age still, you know, spots instantly such positional ideas, which is just incredible. But okay, Carlsen goes for queen captures on h5, and now queen captures on a6. And now it's a bit different because the queens are still on the board, and Nepo also has a passed a pawn now that he can push. So queen to e8. Controlling the back rank, also defending the e6 pawn, and now queen b5. Here Nepo now offers a trade. He would very much like to trade here, get this pawn over here, maybe get some two connected passed pawns, and so on. So queen c6, Magnus says, yes, we will trade, but I'm not getting this pawn all the way to b5. So here c4, again with the same idea. If you trade, you just fix Nepo's pawn structure. But now king f7, Magnus starts bringing the king into the game. We have c5 even. Now, of course, if you trade, then it's just two connected passed pawns. It's you do not want to play against this. So after c5, we have knight to d4, attacking the queen and the knight. But Magnus is avoiding the trade with queen to f1 with check. Sorry, Nepo avoids the trade. Magnus welcomes the trade. We have king to g8 getting out of the way, and now bishop to e3. And here we have some trades. Queen captures on a4, bishop captures on d4, we have e captures, and queen to f4 now, with a double attack on the pawn here and on the rook here. So queen to d7, not giving up pawn for pawn. Magnus says, okay, if I can consolidate, start pushing these pawns, then it's just two very nice pawns in the center. So queen e5 by Nepo, not allowing it. A very nice centralizing move with the queen, but now rook b7. And okay, we have queen to e4, queen to e4, just putting pressure on that rook there. And also keeping an eye on this d3 push, which could be very interesting. But now rook back to b8. So Magnus just needs a move that the rook isn't under attack, and then he can play queen to d5 to offer a queen trade here. So queen e5 again, attacking the rook, but now rook to b4, again defending the pawn, and now preparing queen d5. We have queen e4, and now finally queen to d5. But Nepo, of course, has to avoid the queen trade. He goes queen g4, and now there's a lot of pressure on the knight on b3, so this pawn push could be a problem unless it's not, and here it's not, because if you push it you lose the rook. So queen g4, a good square for the queen, but now we have rook to c4 by Magnus, probably with the idea of pushing the pawn now, but queen back to f4. And now, what do you do here? Well, you could play d3, but then you have to calculate a lot of checks with queen b here check, queen back check, queen c7 check. If the king goes to the h file, queen h2 check. So that's a lot of checks to calculate. So instead, Magnus repeats, rook b4, we have queen g4, another repetition, and queen to f5 now. But now, Nepo goes rook to queen to h4, and here, well, Magnus was able to push the queen away, and here you could play queen captures on c5 as the knight is pinned. But there's also a move that you could play, which Judith Polgar spotted in the live chat, in the live stream during the coverage, and this is just a wonderful idea. So feel free to pause the video and try and spot Judith's idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the most beautiful move in the position. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's queen captures on c2. Crazy stuff. But the point is that now after king captures, d3 check wins the queen on h4. So king captures, rook captures, and now the point is you have 2 pawns and the rook against the pawn and the knight, which is completely winning. And the only thing you have to realize is that after c6, king f7, pawn here, the rook manages to stop the pawn, and now you have a completely winning endgame. So this is one thing you could have done. Magnus goes for rook to c4 instead, now puts pressure on the c2 pawn, and now we have queen to d8 check by Nepo. King h7 and queen back to h4 with check. King g6, and now there are no more useful checks, so Nepo goes for knight captures on d4. But now there's a similar idea here where you can again go queen captures on c2. With check, knight captures, and rook captures, you go into an improved version of that endgame because your king is already on a much more active square. However, Magnus keeps everything on the board. He pins the knight. Now there's a double attack here. He doesn't want to probably overcalculate this, and both of them are extremely low on time. So he goes for this, but now queen g4 check. King h7, and now queen h4 check. Of course, Nepo would be very happy with a draw here. King g8, queen d8 check, king f7 now, and queen to d7 check. King f6, and now as there's still a double attack here, and the pin c3. Defending and unpinning, but now rook captures on c5. So this is what Magnus wanted to achieve. Queen to d8 with check, and now king g6. We have queen to e8 with check, king to h7, and now queen back to d8. So now it's Carlsen's move, rook to d5, attacking the queen, but now again queen h4 check. We have king to g8, this square is now off limits, so queen to g4, and now with a double attack on the pawn here, rook d6 defending the pawn, and now again queen h4, waiting for Magnus to find a move. And it's not all that easy because, well, this knight does a wonderful job at defending all of the squares in front of the white king, so it's not that easy to check him. So queen to f6, offering a trade, queen e4, of course declining the trade. Rook b6 check now, king to c2, and now king to f7. Again, not a lot of useful checks. We have queen to a8 now, and queen to g6 check. King to d2, and now rook to b2 with check. Magnus finds some progress here, king to e3, and now queen g1 check. What do you do with the king? Of course not king f3, because queen h1 check then loses the queen on a8. So here king to d3, but now queen f1 check. King to e3, and now queen to f2 check. We have king to d3, and here Magnus played queen to g2, offering a queen trade, saying that, okay, what do you do now? And probably the best and most complicated for Nepo is to either trade queens and try and hold this, which is very unlikely, or continue checking, and then after, let's say, this, just to keep the queens on the board. However, Nepo went for knight to f3, he blocked it instead, but now there are problems. Queen e2 check, king to d4, and now queen to d1 with check. King back to e3, Now rook to e2 with check, king f4, and then now comes queen to d6 with check. And now the problem is the king has to come up the board. King g4, rook g2 check, as it's possible. The knight blocks the g2 square. King to h5, and here Magnus just played g6, and it was in this position on move 76 that Jan Nepomniachtchi resigned the game, and game 2 also goes to Magnus, so he's very close to winning the second match, and with it the entire match, and with it the entire Legends of Chess tournament on Chess24. So here you resign because it's mate whatever you do. If you go here, then it's queen to goes back to g3. Well, I don't know why I'm picking up the pieces of the wrong color in this video. It's like really weird. Queen g3 with the check will be checkmate, and of course after g6 check, if you go up the board, then it's the very sneaky rook h2 check. You give up the rook, and now just queen f4 check. Wherever the king goes, well, not wherever, he can only go to one square, then just captures, or queen to h4, and this will be checkmate. So very exciting stuff. G6 Nepo resigns, and Magnus one step closer to winning the entire thing. So that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Joseph Bassett, Serge Petitau, Taylor Oates, Paul Nitsov, and Gershon Muchnik for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Legends of Chess tournament. If there will be more exciting games, probably will. Checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the world of chess. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.